Hi, my name is Sandy, and I'm here with Mr. Reyes. I don't know if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Jose Reyes, and I work for the bilingual department here in the Gadsden School District.
We're gonna go ahead and start the interview. What teaching methods do you think are the most effective?
Well, the most effective teaching method that I know is that we need to have teacher presence, and we need to make sure that our lesson plans have student engagement as the focus.
Okay. So, since you think teacher presence is important, how did you adapt your teaching techniques when transitioning to online instruction during the pandemic?
That was really tough. Number one, I don't have a classroom, but I could only empathize how difficult it was because I saw my wife, who was a teacher, and the struggle was we went from hero to nothing in technology. For example, teachers overnight had to create Google Classrooms. They had to create Google Meets. They wondered if it even worked because we don't use those technology tools in the classroom because you're present in a desk.
Yeah.
And what made it really, really surreal is uh, many times students didn't know that if you were live or you were being recorded. And so it was the whole idea of being synchronous and asynchronous, which was a tremendous challenge that I saw in many teachers. For me, and what I get to do in preparing lessons for teachers is I had to be many steps ahead of what was being taught.
Okay.
So the challenge for me was translating, making sure forms and formats were there, and then did it make sense? That was the big piece because just because something works in English doesn't mean it works in another language.
Yeah. How did you adapt your teaching techniques when transitioning to online instruction during the pandemic?
During the pandemic is we had to rely on parent power.
Parent power.
Yeah, in other words, uh, even though we were in front with children, and I would see it with my colleagues because I would sit and see if the lesson worked. And we would wonder, well, is this child going to get busy and get doing it now? Because uh, in the early pandemic, we thought the pandemic was only going to last from March to maybe April.
Yeah.
And so many schools suspended all learning. All we did was just sit and meet and work technology and try to have a lesson plan to get into the groove. But there was the hope that the pandemic was going to end, and then it was late May, and we're wondering how are we going to graduate the seniors? And it was very surreal to be able to graduate kids online too. Then the next year we thought, okay, this horrible affliction of COVID should end in the summer, and that was the promise, and then it didn't end, and we were trapped at home again. And now they told us you have to take learning serious. Now, as far as teaching methods, you can only imagine, just like you and I mean, when we're on the phone, we want to communicate and receive messages. But being online for let's say with a group of children, messages get really garbled because kids were wondering, can I turn off the camera? Can I, the teacher says for me to mute myself. And so we did that with good intention, but it gave us undesirable results. When the kids came back and we gave them tests, we found out that they were very good at listening and very poor in speaking.
Really?
Yes. Why? Because we told them to mute themselves.
Yeah. I never connected that because I know, which leads me to my next question. I feel like doing an online curriculum makes it hard for students to engage. Like how do you make sure that the students are engaged when they're online?
That make sure is really tough. I mean, we had to set boundaries. We had to set policy with the parents to say your computer has to be on at 8 a.m. The big engagement was an adult teacher speaking to the parents who are adults themselves.
Yeah.
To set up at least an educational environment. without an environment, no learning happens.
Yeah, I agree. Because again, when I had to switch to online, I have nephews.
Mhm.
They're noisy. And then when I would be asked to talk, there'd be the noise in the back, and they'd be like, minimize that. But it's hard to control
Yes.
the outside environments.
Yeah, you're really very powerless over many things that you have no control over. I mean, spectrum goes down and the internet is off. Well, the kids are like yelling like it's a snow day.
Yeah.
You know, there's no school. So a lot of challenges during COVID.
Back to the engagement thing.
Mhm.
It says, how do you assess student engagement and ensure that the curriculum aligns with the needs of students, especially in a virtual learning environment, like specific needs? You know how there's different students can be at different levels.
That is probably the biggest puzzle, even when kids are in front of us, and of course online only amplified that. But I can tell you that engagement is gauged by attendance. The number one predictor of student success is attendance. It's difficult to teach to an empty chair.
Yeah.
Okay, and so attendance is the number one. Number two is teacher engagement with the data. Whatever the data that you have available, you have to work on potential energy. The issue, of course, is in learning, it's not tangible. And so that's where the teacher comes in engagement to say, this is where the gap is. Let's learn this so that we can move to there.
What strategies do you employ to promote active participation and discussion among students in a virtual classroom setting?
Well, in a virtual classroom setting, we suddenly learned that both Google Meets and Zoom had breakout rooms. And so you could use breakout rooms, particularly with older children. I mean, younger children, you wouldn't employ that strategy, but with older children, you could assign a leader, and you could have a virtual assignment posted either in the Google Classroom or even as a document inside the Google Meet. But the tools of technology are only as strong as the person using them.
Yeah.
Learning opportunities are constant, and so we have to realize that today's student who is classified English learner or ESL, technology is going to speed up his language, but we also have to set limits.
Yeah.
You know, we have to set limits, particularly older kids who become unengaged. What's their go-to? Copy paste. So how do we teach them not to copy paste? And I mean, now the latest and greatest, this artificial intelligence with ChatGPT. So those are some of the challenges that we have, because as you're learning a second language, you're trying to find, unfortunately, sometimes you're trying to find shortcuts. And those shortcuts work against you because you didn't learn the whole thing. So it's a little, it's a journey to learn a second language. My journey started in the 60s, and we were not allowed to speak Spanish in school, and we were chastised, and we were told we don't use that language here, and English only. And no one told you, you can have both, Jose. Rather, you were kind of lost, wondering, which one do I choose?
Yeah.
And so you didn't belong to either community fully. As a teacher, I knew that I had to equip my children to tell them, this is our Spanish time, this is our English time, but there's going to be times where they both mix, and that's okay.
At what point did you realize you were like, okay, it's okay to have both?
I don't know what it was, because as the oldest in my family, my mom and my dad insisted that we use Spanish at home. But they also knew that English was going to infiltrate the home. And so, being the oldest, I was always asked to be the translator of the family. And so that kind of solidified the idea, you're going to have to use both languages the rest of your life.
Okay. Yeah, I ask because I have, like my nephews, they were born in Juarez, their first language was Spanish. And they came over here, and I think it's surprising because like even now I feel like bilingual is pushed more, like it's better. They barely speak Spanish now. Like they it's like they've forgotten the language, even though like my mom only speaks Spanish at home,
Mm-hmm.
but everybody else at home is like mostly English. And then like for me too, when like English, it was always like English, English, English. But I stuck to Spanish because my mom was like, no, you need to know Spanish. But that influence is not on my nieces and nephews because their mom speaks English.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, because that is possibly it's hip to be in dual language now. Like here in Chaparral, our bilingual process is not to move from Spanish into English. It's to keep both languages simultaneous, and then celebrate the idea, hey, I am proficient in both languages.
Yeah.
But studies suggest that, like for example, when I was a kid, um, the study suggested that back in the 60s and the 70s, it would not be until maybe the second or actually the third generation or fourth generation, where the children of those generations lost Spanish and they all spoke English. Today, we're finding that children that are not encouraged to use the mother language, which would be the language of the home, in this case Spanish, they, just like your cousins, it takes one generation just to forget the native language.
What do you find to be the thing that students struggle with the most in learning a second language?
What I feel they find the most difficult is sometimes the intolerance of adults, because they're intelligent people and they're figuring out, hey, I'm struggling to learn this, and you're not tolerant enough to just wait.
Okay.
Okay, that's one of the struggles.
Yeah. And then the final question, what do you consider an ideal class size? Did your ideal class size change when switched online?
Oh, yes, absolutely. There's quality in numbers, and the research will tell you that it hasn't changed. We like to tell teachers, especially, children learn best with quality interaction with an adult. So if you have 40 children at one time, what kind of quality interaction can you have?
Not much.
Not much. So yes, class size is very important. And so I observed in Gadsden that our class sizes were probably, or class sessions, not necessarily, I could be assigned 25 kids or 24 kids, but you would have a session with maybe 12 kids. And so those other 12 kids were doing something independent away from the Google Meet, and then they were called back. And so teachers are just, I am amazed at the talent that we have in today's new art and science of teaching, that says, I know when to calculate and when to move. Gone are the days where I teach 25 kids the same. Gone are the days, I hope. Because if we do that, then we're not attending to diversity. So knowing my students for their strengths and weaknesses allow me then to set up groups where I can lead, I can be the facilitator, or they facilitate each other, and then we rotate. So that's one strategy. Okay, we call it cooperative learning.
How do you determine what level the student needs to be?
Well, you have different indicators. You have physical data from the year before. So that means you're working on potential energy. Okay, so I scored a level 3 in the spring of last year. Am I still a 3? Well, a 3 was measured. Let's say the bar is from 0 to 5, and I'm a 3 at 3rd grade. So I'm an intermediate student. At 4th grade, if I'm treated as an intermediate student, I'll be an intermediate student. So teachers are trained to teach you at level 3, but give you some level 4 stuff, and keep working towards the next one and the next one. So you have to look at your physical data. If you don't look at your physical data, you don't have a lunch. So for example, we have children from Venezuela coming into Chaparral. How do we know they're beginners in English? Would it be fair for them to be taking a language arts class? Well, no. So we have to say, maybe this year everything is in Spanish, because we need to teach them the ways of how we do things in the United States. and they can do it in their language. So we attend to their intelligence. Next year we start beginning level of English. And so we do have some resources where we have computer programming where they're going to be listening at their level while still participating with people of their age.
Oh, wonderful.
Okay, so that's something that is novel and new. And we ask teachers, I get the chance to interview teachers and how is that program working for you? Can you show me data? Can you show me samples?
All right. Well, thank you so much.
My
Nice to
pleasure.
meet you.
My pleasure, Sandy.